Snake!
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. This is Jorin Lee and Shaine Smith in the first entry of our new podcast for Metal Gear, Shadow Moses Café.
Hi everybody.
Yeah, we're just gonna introduce ourselves here. So Shaine, you wanna go first?
Hi, I'm Shaine. I started playing Metal Gear around 1998 when my dad got it for Christmas, and now I translate the Substance novels that came out in Japan for everybody to get them in the West, so everybody has something to read and just to keep Metal Gear going. So I like to tote myself as a historian, and I love to still play the games. I've played every game since.
Awesome.
And what about you, Jorin? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jorin Lee. I'm a YouTuber who specializes in making videos on Kojima's games. First Metal Gear I played was Sons of Liberty back in 2001, and I've never stopped playing since. So
We are out here playing Metal Gear.
Oh yeah, a lot.
And we're out here to talk about Metal Gear.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, I picked of all the creators and all the series that I could focus on in my work, I picked Metal Gear because I'm like, I could probably talk about that until I die.
Well, it makes it so easy that Kojima just pumps so much not just the regular text, just story and lore and all this stuff, but then the subtext under of everything that he says, there's years to talk about here.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, the amount of research and stuff that I had to do just to feel like I was even on the same page, was a lot. But that's the other cool thing is that there are so many different angles to take Metal Gear Solid. Like me, I gravitate towards more of the history and political stuff and military stuff, but I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, so.
When I started really going deep into just the emotional side of Metal Gear is when I started really blossoming into the games and the narrative, because I feel like that's, for me, because it's different for everybody, which I love, but for me, that's where Metal Gear thrives.
The human element.
Yeah. And it's we were just talking about this earlier, as a mother, I see Metal Gear very differently from people who aren't parents, and I say that a lot too, well, if you're a parent, you would totally get Metal Gear differently than somebody who isn't a parent. And then someone's like, well, I don't get that. And then somebody who's a parent is like, yep, I totally see where you're coming from. Because it's just having kids just really just warps the perception of all the stuff that these people, the people go through in the games. And I would love to get into it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's such a recurring theme. I mean, it's probably the recurring theme, is just reproduction and the future and, what we pass on. I mean, that's Metal Gear through and through. And I guess I kind of agree with you that, yeah, as much as the military and political and historical stuff interests me, I guess really at the end of the day, the emotional side, the drama, the human element, that if that wasn't there, I don't think I would be really interested in this series too much, so.
Yeah, well, the military side is still super, super important. Just proliferation of weapons and just the acknowledgement of certain weapons at play in some of these stories, just because some are just easy to deal with, your basic guns and grenades, but then
right.
You have a fake weapon like Metal Gear, but also just the very real threat of nuclear weapons,
yes.
which is still a hot topic today. It's very easy to get into, and it's really interesting that you can tackle Metal Gear in so many different ways.
Yeah, I think that's part of how it's, I guess, designed as a game, is to be so open-ended for so many different viewpoints, But, I mean, I definitely went through a period where I was not playing the games as much, and I was trying to do other things in my life, and I think what really drew me back is, I was doubtful. I had doubts going into Phantom Pain. I was like, because I didn't love 4. But I played it at a time in my life when I was half paying attention, if I'm being honest, to games, because I was a senior in high school and I just had other stuff going on, so I didn't really give that game its full due when it came out. But yeah, I mean, when Phantom Pain came out, I went into it very skeptical that there was anything left to say that it was really going to be good, and it ended up being one of the greatest games I've ever played and a huge life-changing experience. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just, just saying this stuff to convince myself that it was all worthwhile, like all the time I've put into it. But I genuinely think that Phantom Pain is one of the greatest games ever made.
I wholeheartively agree. After, I was already dead set on Phantom Pain day one. I remember when they announced that damn game. I was living in Japan at the time, right? So it was I remember running out of my apartment screaming. I was so happy just to say it. But the trailers were coming out, and then of course the news broke about David Hayter and blah blah blah. And it's I sad to say I was part of that posse that signed petitions and got mad online.
Yeah.
Oh, David Hayter's not going to be in this game. Why are we even going to buy it? But then eventually I bought it. Of course, we bought it day one.
Yeah.
We still have our day one copy, and I love that game. Oh my god! I think I put a tweet out today. I was I spent over 600 hours in Phantom Pain, which I know is a drop in the bucket for some people, but
that's a lot.
It was a lot. I love the way he does the tape system. I know a lot of people don't agree with the tape system. I love the tape system because you can listen to it at your own pace. It feels like you've got something tangible, you've been past something, instead of just imagine if this game came out in 1998, where back then you had to play the game again to see that cutscene, to get that lore. If you needed to prove this point, experiencing a cutscene, you might not ever see that cutscene again, and then you'd have to play the whole game again just to see the cutscene. But then you've got these tapes where right now I could boot up the Phantom Pain and be this tape right here, and I can play it anytime I want. I love that from a lore standpoint, but I can understand some people found that cumbersome. They have it's that meme that you keep seeing where it's cutscene in a Sony game or cutscene in a Kojima game is the guy who puts down the controller and picks up the popcorn.
Yeah.
You have to play the tape and put the controller down. But when I played Peace Walker and he then brought the tapes over to, Ground Zeroes and Phantom Pain, I was ecstatic. I was oh, I hope he keeps this forever. And then, he technically did because it's over.
Yeah. To me, I love that it's the whole conceit of real time. I think, to me, that is the essence of Metal Gear Solid. Going back to the first one, things playing out in real time, not pre-rendered, rendered in-game as it's happening. And I think the tapes are so perfect for that, because it's you can't hear the tapes in a vacuum. No matter where you are, some element of your environment, you're going to hear a bird or the iDroid is going to tell you something, or Quiet's going to be humming.
I love that.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, when the iDroid's fog or rain, and it just feels like you're really there. Yeah,
exactly. And the whole game, espionage and spying and intelligence, this is the type of shit you do. You listen to transcripts, you try to figure out what somebody was alluding to. And of course, if you're an actual spy during the Cold War, you have the luxury of being able to send somebody in, to ask questions and then come back and report to you. That's human, as I'm sure you and other people listening know, human intelligence. But signals intelligence is more what you're doing in Phantom Pain, which is listening to transcripts and just trying to figure shit out. And, I think as somebody who wants to play a spy game, which most of the people playing Metal Gear probably are in that bracket, it is closer to an actual spy experience than anything with Tom Clancy's name on it, I think. Even though Splinter Cell is still a good series, I just think it's a very different approach.
Honestly, I'm trying to get into Splinter Cell. I'm so jealous they have all these books. You have no idea the envy I feel when I walk into Barnes & Noble and I just see, all these Tom Clancy, Splinter Cell, Rainbow Six, Jack Ryan. I'm that could be us.
Well, but, the stories aren't very well written is the only thing,
That is the sad part.
Yeah. I think Metal Gear and Solid, at least in some ways, is kind of a response to Jack Ryan and the whole Tom Clancy when he was writing books, and Ronald Reagan was praising them and saying everyone should read this. It's a Hunt for Red October and all that. It's the idea of the monolithic enemy and the main hero being named Jack. And
you want to think of Kojima as a completely creative, but he's also a businessman, and he has to be smart about what happens in his space, and he is extremely well read. I think every week he posts a different book he's read.
Yeah.
And I know for sure he's read some Tom Clancy. And so it sounds like, he knew what was out there and he had to compete. But not necessarily so. I don't have any proof on that, but it does make sense that he definitely knew of a Tom Clancy story. It doesn't necessarily have to be Jack Ryan or or Sam Fisher, but like it was easy to, because then there's even Gabe from Siphon Filter, like that came out a little later, which I think was definitely, I think that definitely was a response to not only to Tom Clancy, but also Metal Gear, because Metal Gear was taking over by that point.
Big time. Yeah, big
time.
So
it was, that's just interesting to see and talk about.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you know, that was the biggest thing that people had in their minds in terms of what is a covert operative and stuff. It's like, I think there was a time when James Bond was synonymous, but yeah, I think by the late 20th century, you know, the average person would maybe be more familiar with one of Tom Clancy's books, because they were really popular, but they did present a version of the world that, you know, I feel like Metal Gear is very much trying to counter, and I think that's really interesting about it.
I actually joke about this with my husband a lot, because my husband's an officer in the Navy, and he gets on these things called secret computers, which is like all the shit he would have to kill me for if he were to tell me about it, like, lives on these computers. And he knows way more shit than he lets on. He has to come home and live with that, and I'm not allowed to know, because I'm technically a civilian. So when we watch military movies together, for example, we watched Battleship, which is that movie that came out years ago. Horrible movie. But he would like criticize all this shit that would happen. Like, they took the US, like the Battleship Missouri out to fight these fucking aliens. And he's like, there's no way any of those turrets would move. There's no way that shit would ignite. And I turn to him and I look at him and I go, we're civilians. We don't know that.
I talk a lot about this in my own work, especially when I was doing videos focusing on Metal Gear Solid 1, you know, that all the technology that is behind modern video games was created by the military. And I'm not saying that as some sort of conspiracy theorist, because I'm not. But, you know,
you're completely true. So much shit in the media is controlled by the military.
Yeah, I mean,
we're not going to get into that.
Exactly.
This is totally true. But you're right. You're totally right.
And that I think, especially like when I started doing research in it and figuring out, you know, wow, the same technology, you know, that is in the PlayStation 1 was also used by DARPA to simulate tank battles in Desert Storm and stuff, and how you start to notice, like, well, this technology is not only, you know, making it easier to train soldiers, but to indoctrinate civilians and soldiers alike into a certain way of seeing the American army and seeing the enemy and all these things. And I think, yeah, that, to me, like, that was a big part of the whole impetus behind making Metal Gear Solid, you know, in this post-Cold War era, which, you know, when you think about it, like, Metal Gear 1 and 2 technically were made during the Cold War. So Metal Gear Solid was the first game, even though I know Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake came out, like, literally as the Cold War was ending, I think it was still devised as a Cold War game. And if you go back, like, the near future that they had envisioned for Metal Gear 2, it was sort of a new détente. Like, the Cold War had basically ended, but there were still East and West. And that's why I know you're super familiar with Metal Gear 2. You know, they have all those references to the Eastern Bloc and the STB.
Yeah, this was a game that was made of the times, which I know Kojima, you know, it's a huge theme of, you know, times and the politics, like, turn with the times and whoever's sitting in the chair of the leader. But when it comes to his games, as there's no escaping it. It's kind of like fate. When it comes to Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, that was a game totally made of the time.
Yeah, I think so. But, you know, as it went on, I think, and the Cold War ended and America became, you don't really hear this term anymore, but, you know, for a while they were banding around this term hyperpower. You know, superpowers are done. Now we got the hyperpower, the only superpower. And yeah, I think a lot of the elements of Metal Gear Solid that are maybe questioning aspects of American foreign policy or American military stuff, I think is a reflection of that. And, you know, Kojima has talked about, he considers science fiction, the SF, to also stand for speculative fiction. And I think that's a real insight into his process, because a lot of his games are sort of doomsday scenarios that are built on plausible scenarios to raise awareness that, hey, this is really dangerous, and even if this story is fictional, some of this stuff isn't. Like, and
so he's like making his own subsection of Orwellian horror.
I think so. Yeah, I do think so. I think so. Where it's this nightmare, you know, that's lurking under our midst, and nobody is aware of it. But, you know, Yeah, I mean the nuclear storage. If you actually look, even today, like the security on those nuclear storage facilities is quite low compared to what it should be. And people have just accepted the presence of nuclear weapons and nuclear materials, and so they don't bat an eye when it's like, oh, we need an extra however many billions of dollars to build next generation nuclear weapons. Like, people don't really care anymore, and I think that's bad because we've lost touch with and I myself, I was born in 1990, so I wasn't alive during the Cold War. I don't really know what it's like to live under the specter of mutually assured destruction. But maybe not living under that specter has made it easier to just forget that nukes still are out there and they can still destroy us all. Like, so.
Oh yeah, they're super. It's still a threat, if that makes any sense. Like, it's not like they went anywhere, and it is so harrowing that nobody cares. And I'm not saying like as like civilians nobody cares. Like, the leaders don't care, and they took great strides to like kind of. Not to totally cover it up that like, oh yeah, we totally took care of the nukes. Like, they totally stored them. And also it's not to like completely quote Metal Gear Solid 1. There's for sure like still today, like, huge black market for just shells.
Muff.
And and it's just, like, I'm not a military strategist, but it's not gonna go anywhere anytime soon. I think we're gonna be living with the shadow of nuclear warfare over our heads for a really long time, and it's going to take either nuclear war or like something extremely radical for us to like decommission anything.
Yeah, and it'd have to be mutual or something imposed by a third body, because obviously America's not going to, disarm if Russia's still got theirs and stuff, and that's...
We're still doing proxy wars places too. Like, there's no way, because if this proxy battle goes south and then the superpower says, oh, well, you shouldn't have been there meddling, we're just going to go to DEFCON this, and then it's just like, it has to be there, because deterrence is just too... valuable.
Yeah, it's woven
because
into the fabric.
It's the ultimate gotcha.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what's that phrase Cody loves to say? My husband, he loves to say, "Fuck me, fuck you." That's literally what deterrence is.
A zero-sum
game.
And
yes, it's the basilisk, where the rider struck the basilisk and the venom seeped down his sword, killed both rider and horse, and. You can't blame the other without getting slapped on the hand yourself. We can go about it every other way, but it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And the fact that we just like turned a blind eye, the powers of the world turned a blind eye to Muff, and as well as like the continued proliferation of nuclear, not just spending, but also development. Like, it's still going on. And it's just going to get worse before it gets better. And that's not for any of us to say how it's going to go, because we're just two lore masters on Metal Gear.
Right. Yeah, it might be
I
beyond...
would love to have my husband here.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I can offer is I've read books, but obviously reading a book doesn't make you a damn expert, but... I mean,
my husband, he's a master's in warfare in the Eastern Sea, so it would be great if he was here.
Yeah, we should have him on sometime, honestly. If he'd be down, I'd love to pick his brain.
We have to do it soon because he's about to go underway.
Oh man.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's just I even, for my some of my videos I did on MGS1, I had to go out and find footage of what you're talking about next generation weapons development and stuff. And yeah, it's like I went to Livermore National Labs, not Rivermore as it's called in Metal Gear.
Oh, they had to do that for
Of course, for copyright reasons or what have you, but yeah, I mean, it's the propagandistic language. Not once in the video did anybody utter the word nuclear weapon. No.
Oh,
we're safeguarding.
So
we're safeguarding the stockpile. That's how they put it. We're safeguarding the stockpile. So it's the whole concept. It's presented as something for security, and I think that helps people accept it. But yeah, I mean, they showed this AI lab that they use, quantum computing and all sorts of, cutting edge methods to run simulations of nuclear weapons that if they actually carried out those simulations in the real world, it would violate treaties about test bans and stuff. But because it's in a lab, they can do whatever they want, and so that's
you would be surprised how long that's been going on.
Yeah, it's crazy.
ever tell you my dad works in building weapons for the military?
Yeah, you mentioned that, and this is one of the many reasons why I say you feel to me, don't take offense at this, but you feel like a character from one of these games because you have this background that's just so awesome and so perfectly suited for this series. Like, but yeah, what kind of weapons does your dad work on?
So legally, I can tell you one.
Okay.
So I remember, and this was years ago. I remember my dad. He had come home from deployment for so long, and he had these hoodies with him, and on them were the Predator drone. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
Of course, that's like the most famous drone. Yeah.
My dad built it.
What?
So yes.
Holy shit.
So my dad built the Predator drone, and he had come home with like the hoodies that they had made at the warehouse to commemorate this drone, this horrible weapon.
Wow.
And I wore that with pride at school.
Oh man.
I wore that for years, and I wish I still had it. But yeah, it was kind of like a Huey situation. Remember when he said that he went to school and a Japanese girl came to school and showed pictures of Hiroshima?
Yeah.
Couldn't talk to his dad for weeks or years after that. And when I found out like what my dad was building, I was like, it's kind of fucked up, dude. Like I didn't stop talking to him, but I was like, really? I wore that hoodie for years.
And yeah, but that's, I feel like another big takeaway from the series is that not everybody who's involved in this is a bad you can be a good person.
Oh yeah.
It's that's what I really like about these games, and is that it's very rare that you'll find, even the people who are villains, it's rare you'll find one that doesn't have some kind of argument or point of view that you don't find at least a little convincing, or a little like, okay, I can kind of see where he's coming from on this. I still have to kill him, but
Yeah. Oh yeah, just like the villain makes an amazing point, and it's like, well, you have no choice.
Oh shit, yeah, I guess you got me there. Or even just
cool story, still murder.
Yeah, or even side characters like Huey, or like the people who are involved who are completely innocent that have been used by the system. You know what I mean? I think that's a big theme, especially in Metal Gear Solid 1.
Otacon, Hal is like the poster boy for that.
Yeah,
where he's almost in my dad's shoes at that point. He was a contracted. He was a contractor, right? He was contracted by the military to go down to Shadow Moses, which in the Substance novel, the Japanese novel, that was a completely like outfitted military base. When Foxhound unit got there, they retrofitted it to become like a fortress, and where they held technically Decoy Octopus, but where they held the DARPA chief and Meryl, they retrofitted. Those were technically like visiting cells. Like they had made them into prisons by the time like Snake got there, and they had all those cameras you see on the walls. Like they had like fitted those on the walls before Snake got there, and it was that type of thing. So it was technically it was a military base, but they had completely flipped it in like record time to become this impregnable fortress.
Right, and I guess it's owned and operated by Armstech, right? So it's like a hybrid between the military and a private company. That's what, to me, is so scary. Yeah.
It was kind of like Arsenal or Big Shell, where like you visit and it seems like this, but then you go down past the blast furnace and it's actually a weapons lab.
Exactly, yeah. Which is awesome. The whole conceit of it's like you've built this decoy facility, but stuff like that.
You'd be surprised how many of those we have.
Yeah, it's surreal sometimes when you come across something in the real world and it reminds you of Metal Gear, and you're just like, whoa, it makes your head spin.
I actually embarrassed myself one time. Like it was I should have never said anything. We were living in Japan. I was walking to the ship to go pick my husband up from work. Yeah, and I was walking with the captain, and because we were just walking back from the fleet wreck, and I look over and I see like what are they called? They're like the big like containers from Metal Gear Solid 5 where you can get containers of material.
Yeah, like the cargo containers, yeah.
Yeah, the huge cargo containers. They're of course fucking real. And I look over and there's tons of them in the shipyard. Right. I was like, oh look, I saw those in Metal Gear Solid 5, haha. And he looked at me like I grew 3 heads, and I would just shut the fuck up their entire walk back. Like, it was so embarrassing.
Oh, man.
And my husband was like, oh, you walked with the captain. How was that? I was like, fine.
Don't mention it.
don't say anything.
But no, I mean, it was a valid observation, right? I mean, I think that theme of, globalization and shipping, like supposedly that's an area where we have really bad security, which is sort of why I think it is in Phantom Pain in a way, is it's sort of a specter, if you will, like because there are so many containers on so many ships being moved around the world at any one time that it's actually quite difficult to keep track of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
After what happened with Suez, that was huge. I wanted to make so many jokes about what happened with Suez and like the stalling of not only goods, but like a lot of like information gets passed through ships as they go in and out.
Oh, big time.
And so it's just like everything stopped for a week. And I was just like, this, and it had repercussions just for that week.
Yeah.
Huge repercussions from that. And I was like, you guys have no idea what would happen if, like, everything went off the grid for, like, a month.
Yeah.
We would halt as a species.
Which is crazy.
When you think about that, like, for a month, if everything stopped, like, not to take into consideration, human beings that need technology to live, they're on machines, or they need to charge something to live, or, to take into consideration people who just use the internet, need the internet to work, have electric cars, or, just like they live in a city, or they're even isolated. If we were to like just everything to turn off for a month, as a species, we have been conditioned by the internet and by technology. We would die out. Like there's no way.
No, and it's true. And it's just, it sort of reminds me of the whole conceit in 5 of like, a parasite or something that infects you or merges with your it makes it so you can't get rid of it and you just have to adapt. Like supposedly there are microorganisms in our gut that a long time ago were invasive species that we've co-evolved with, and
really?
Yeah, and supposedly this is part of the whole Miller with the McDonald's. Like, apart from the joke, yeah, I mean, obviously it's a great joke, but yeah, really, apparently, like, McDonald's is killing these types of microorganisms because they're not getting a diverse enough diet, and so they say that a traditionally Western diet is associated with autoimmune disorders. Because,
oh my God.
Yeah, because if you go from predominantly eating non-Western to Western, just like fried, French fries and hamburgers and stuff, like supposedly it kills a lot of the stuff in your gut, and for some people that creates autoimmune disorders. In fact, the only thing I could find on actual real-world parasite therapy was this freak guy who, I guess he was a researcher or something, and he got the idea there was a certain parasite, he thought if he infected himself with it, that it would restore the gut bacteria levels, and he would sort of it would be a treatment for his autoimmune.
I remember this. Didn't he drink it?
Yeah. And it worked. Apparently that it is looked at as a emerging viable field, is parasite therapy to assist in these things, to get
He's a true scientist. That's what actual scientists do.
Yeah, I can't research it too much because honestly, like I found some stories about some parasites and some that were just really disgusting and really hard for me. Like I remember Kojima saying he made the whole team go down to some like parasite museum in Japan just to get a sense of like what they were working on and what parasites really are and stuff, and I'm just like, man, you got to have an iron stomach to be able to look into some of this stuff, honestly.
I was really tickled when they did the BBC Earth snail analogy.
Oh,
which is, did you ever see BBC Earth
on
the parasite episode? So on BBC Earth, yeah, I know you've seen it, but for viewers, there's an episode where a parasite infects a snail. And you just see these two parasites like in the eye stalks of the snail almost pulsating. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
But it's also forcing the snail to go as high as it can on a tree, on a flower, anything to get in a bird's view. Because the whole point is for the snail to get eaten so it can be digested by the bird and get passed on into water or onto a bug or onto something to keep going. Which is, a gene analogy. Yeah. And so, of course, you get to the fucking guy who's, like, dying at the top of the quarantine building, and he's like, I'm no snail. I'm not going outside. And immediately, I'm talking, like, when the game dropped, we were playing that. Immediately, I was like, oh, my God. not only did they do it, but then the people from like that also happened with Last of Us. Like they ripped off. It blatantly said like, oh well, we were ripping off BBC.
Yeah, the cordyceps. Yeah. Yes.
And I thought that was so cute.
Whew.
I was like, love that.
It freaks me out just because I think like they're almost kind of trying to hint towards the idea like, what if ideas are a kind of parasite? You know, what if we are?
Oh, they totally are. You're almost there. You're hitting on the nose.
Yeah. So it's just that creeps me out, but I guess it's important to consider.
Imagine the snail is a centrist, and then you've got somebody, right? But then you've got an ideal that like just like gets into you and it takes you over, takes you to the top, and then you're eaten by, you know, just like what we'll just call it consequences.
Yeah. You know, if you think about how war has become a business and how these wars depend on, you know, new people to fight them, and the grievances that these people, you know, oh, my father or my uncle was killed in an American airstrike, and so I'm going to go fight them in this army, and then they just end up feeding the system that they're trying to fight. Like, I think. So
in that sense, you can see the snail and the parasite as like, in today's world, the military has really gotten their hands on movies. They love Marvel.
Yeah.
So that would be like, you know, the indoctrination of the youth through, you know, media, film, and then they get fed into the machine of war, and not necessarily war, because we're technically not at war right now.
No.
But, you know, like, they get, you know, they're signed up, and then whatever happens, you know, just like if the war breaks out, you signed up, bye. Like, it's that type of stuff. So luckily we're not at war right now, but hopefully, I do not hope for war to break out. Please do not let war break out.
Oh no, this war is peace.
Oh my god. Jorin.
We've got peacekeepers, you know. We don't have soldiers, we have peacekeepers.
Oh, I love propaganda in the morning, don't you? I just love, like, making a full pot of Folgers and being like, I want to hear propaganda.
Yes.
I love it. I don't want to be big-headed. Like, I think there's some propaganda I like, subscribe to because, like, the Garfield image always gets to me where it's like, you are not immune to propaganda. There's some propaganda I definitely see where it's like, American ideals in food. I love hamburgers. I love hot dogs.
Me too.
Where every American's different. And then you have to consider Native Americans where that's not their national food. But when it comes to the quote unquote American national food, I fucking love apple pie. I love a good hamburger. I love hot dogs that have been on the grill for way too long. They're charred till they're fucking black. And I love it. That's the propaganda I like. That's technically, wouldn't that fall under like the American dream? Like that's like an American dream propaganda I kind of subscribe to.
I think it's part of that, but you know, I don't think. I think I remember reading that in other languages and in other times, you know, the word propaganda didn't necessarily come with the negative charge that we put to it today, where it's...
No, you can say that about cults because that originated from the Greek cultists, from the people who cultivated temples, right? And then it eventually evolved into, don't get me started, it eventually evolved to radical people who just upkeep these religions that eventually like just got too extreme. I'm not going to say something that's probably going to get me, you know, killed, but like at the same time, like a lot of modern religions, not going to say which ones, a lot of modern religions started as cults and are now accepted.
That's absolutely true. I mean, it's a thin line, but you know, I think the issue, I don't think is anything, at least from Metal Gear's point of view. It's almost like, I think that Phantom Pain in particular is trying to say, it's not anything inherently about America that is an issue, or it's more about any society that becomes that powerful, that has that much control.
Yeah, I think they were hitting this part of globalization for sure, because England, France, and India became nuclear powers, and then it was just like the domino effect after that. Everybody had deterrence. We have a lot of deterrence flinging around right now.
Well, and they're pursuing it. I mean, they are definitely pursuing it.
For sure.
You know, and this is, again, this could be a whole separate podcast in of itself, but like that, a lot of this kind of dovetails with Pakistan getting the bomb in the 90s. And in turn, you know, why America after 9/11 went to war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and avoided talking about the influence that Pakistan was having on the radicalization of Muslims in Afghanistan, which of course they share a border and they share a language, and the Pashtun language. And there are a lot of things that really we should have been talking about Pakistan militancy, but because they had a nuclear bomb, that was, we were never going to talk about that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Which
also falls under propaganda. They didn't want that getting out.
Well, definitely. I mean, that's the thing is, at the end of the day, every state has its interests that it has to pursue, and I guess propaganda is just one way of going about that. But yeah, I think the issue is if something becomes so monolithic, and it goes back to Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan and all these great conquerors that they talk about in the game. It's like they just, as human beings, had this innate drive to want to conquer and spread their memes, I guess you could say.
Yeah, same with Napoleon the Emperor. I just watched, I don't know if you watched this guy, Oversimplified on YouTube.
I've seen some of his stuff.
His history stuff. He just published Napoleon, it's a 2-part video.
Awesome.
And boy, oh boy, did I learn something. He even listed him. He was a great propagandist.
Yeah.
A lot of the paintings he commissioned himself. I loved learning about that. I was like, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to watch to refresh, and I've never been that well read on Napoleon to begin with, but didn't he sort of construe France as the new Roman Empire, right?
The Pope pretty much dissolved the Holy Roman Empire immediately.
Right.
It just straight up erased it from history. Obviously, it's not erased from history. We know about it, but just dissolved it.
Yeah.
Because of Napoleon.
Which is crazy.
And then he made himself emperor.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of people say that was like Hitler 1.0. Some people say because
for sure.
How they had
he was suppressing anybody that was trying him.
Yeah, and just trying to take over all of Europe, and then the European countries had to band together to fight him, and then I think they call it the Concert of Europe was sort of the first run of what would become the League of Nations, and then the UN. It all kind of goes back
and
to
it definitely ended when they were all hunting him. It wasn't just France; they wanted him.
Yeah.
It was that bad. It was so funny. But when it comes to stuff like that, that was just funny to bring up.
It does have some relevancy too, because I don't know if you ever played Snatcher, but Napoleon makes an appearance in Snatcher.
I need to play Snatcher.
Yeah.
I like getting online and pretending that I know a lot about Snatcher, and I have to actually play it. I'm gonna seem so stupid. I'm gonna get off here tonight and go play stuff. Okay, where can I get it? Can I get it on GOG? I swear to God, I saw it on GOG.
Well,
no.
Honestly, your best bet is going to be to pirate it and play it as a ROM, just because an actual hard copy of Snatcher on Sega CD, it's very hard to get your hands on, because the Sega CD,
good, buddy.
Yeah, so it's really easy to emulate. I can even just send you the files, but the best version you want to go for, I would say, is the Sega CD, because that's the one that is in English. It's the first, I know, is the first Kojima game that Jeremy Blaustein worked on.
Okay. Did you see last night I read the Worlds of Power?
Right.
Metal Gear, which of course is whimsical, under no circumstance canon at all. It was so funny. So many people made so much art, edits, Wes made a voice, a voice thing she did. It was so fucking funny. Everybody just banded together for 5 hours straight to just shit on this book that came out in 1990. It came out the year you were born.
Yeah.
And I can just imagine. I hope that the author's still alive. Can you imagine if they saw us just shitting on it just one day, just I thought you guys forgot about it. But yeah, it was kind of like that. But why I bring this up is the way it was written. It feels like Raymond Benson read this and then wrote the Metal Gear Solid 1 novelization, because it's super die-hard, super lethal weapon, right, over the top. Snake's this badass that just can't be killed. It was a lot.
Jeez, man. Ugh, and that's the thing, is I feel like Snake, even though he's the main character, from a narrative perspective, and this is kind of why I don't think a movie of Metal Gear Solid is going to work that well. I don't think he's that interesting in any other format except a game, because as a game, you can easily imagine you're him. He's basically, he's barely even there, right? If we're talking Solid Snake. But
yeah, so I feel so sad because I'm in the same boat. I'm so weary about the movie. I'm excited about it because it brings more attention to Metal Gear Solid.
Yes.
But when there's a long bout of him being quiet, that's in character for him. He's not a loud guy. He's not constantly talking. I know, like, there was a whole joke about, Kiefer Sutherland, Venom Snake, never talks. And it's like, this isn't character for him. Like, it's not like he's, like, constantly shooting off one-liners. And then if you go off into the lore of the games, like, Naked Snake, a lot of people's memories are of Metal Gear Solid 3, which, it came out right after the boom of Metal Gear Solid 2, so everybody had to get Metal Gear Solid 3. A lot of people played Metal Gear Solid 3. A lot of people's memories of their first game of Metal Gear is Metal Gear Solid 3. Naked Snake talked a shit ton. He was a run gun, super young dude that was just wanted to prove himself. And, like, in a lot of the codecs, he talks. Metal Gear Solid 2, Snake only talks when you call him on codec. And, like, he's not that much of a talker, to begin with. He, just his canon, he's a soft-spoken, hard-tack guy. And he's not this super big action hero people make him out to be. And that's part of the legend he's trying to get away from. Everybody wants to, like, pin on Snake. You're this big action. You're this legendary guy. Oh my god, you took down all these Metal Gears. You're so awesome. And, like, all he wants to do is sit on his front porch on a rocking chair and smoke a fucking cigarette. That's all he's literally an old man at heart. And he did what he had to do, mostly because he was forced to do it.
Yeah, and a lot of times he was just a pawn for a very bad system. So, I mean, it's hard to say that he's actually that much of a hero even. I don't know. Yeah,
and I was just saying, I was like, it was only until, like, his fucking 30s he actually started to live. And it wasn't even living, because he was forced to do Big Shell. And it wasn't like he was forced, but it's the obligation that he felt forced to, get rid of. Not only take documentation of Ray, but then after the tanker went down and then the shell went up, he had the obligation to finish it. Yeah. So he had to go back. And then... And then 4, he was forced. Not really forced, but he was, like, begged. Like, you have to get Liquid. It was that type of thing. It's tragic. Solid Snake is a tragic character.
It really is.
And when you want to translate that to film... Like, that's going to be so hard, because you're going to have fans like us, and most likely a lot of people listening right now, who know Snake from this sense that I just said. Yeah. And they're going to see this action hero on screen. And it's almost going to feel like, dare I say it, it's going to feel like a legendary propaganda. Like, you're supposed to think Snake is like this. So imagine new people who know of Metal Gear, probably never played the game, maybe played 5 because it's new, it's accessible. And they know of Solid Snake. They know, like, Super Smash Brothers, blah, blah, blah. The modern way Snake is presented today. They go see the movie, and who knows how Jorin's going to approach it. I trust him, but if he makes him to this big action hero guy who jumps and shoots and runs and does all these action stunts and stuff and says all these one-liners and, does this cool Snake thing, people who don't know Metal Gear and don't know Snake are going to just think that's how he is. Yeah. And I get it's a franchise. I get he's not real. But to lore masters like you and me, this is going to hurt.
It's also just the spirit of the game. It's like, I'm not super concerned from the perspective of lore. It's just, I want to make sure they get the tone right and the character right as much as they can. And it's impossible. Yeah, I mean, I know even Kojima himself, going back to what you were just saying about, you walked us through the evolution, I guess, of the character. And I think Kojima one time said that he didn't really like Solid Snake, because he thought of Solid Snake as almost like a monster. And Naked Snake, Big Boss, he allowed him to be more human because he was a full human, not a clone, not some lab experiment. And so I guess that's why you see Naked Snake talk so much more, and, he's okay with being goofy or okay with being, weird. I mean, he says things that you could never see Solid Snake saying. And I think that's sort of why, is because he's supposed to be more human, but...
Yeah, I have my own theories on, like, why Solid Snake acts the way he does, that, like, monstrous and silent and almost calculating, because he's almost, like, stone cold, and, like, a lot of the versions you see him, where, he was trained under Big Boss's thumb during Foxhound, and... the whole meme, or when I say meme, I don't mean like as a joke. The whole aspect of him getting sent into outer heaven was he was a rookie. When you think about it, he was being trained under Big Boss. Yeah. So Big Boss sent him in as a rookie, but he was probably overqualified because he was trained specifically under Big Boss. But because he was being trained under Big Boss specifically, like, you know damn well, like that boy was like brainwashed for weeks leading up to N313, and that he has severe PTSD. This is like obviously explained in pretty much every manual. Like he's broken, and he didn't have time to heal up until he was 30. Yeah. Like his only way to cope was to escape. He ran out on everybody. Yeah. Like after N313, he left Foxhound. After FO14, he dipped on Holly and went to Alaska. Yeah. And even before N313 and FO14, he tried his hand at mercenary work for the CIA, didn't like it, and left. And it's just he couldn't. It was just his way. His way of coping was to stay silent and to be distant. And I don't know how they're gonna translate that to a movie they want to do.
You know, when you speak it, you remind me of Quiet. What you just said. Yeah, that's very interesting what you said, but you've opened a door in my head to seeing Solid Snake in a more empathetic way, because I guess that's true that, you know, he really didn't have a choice. He didn't, you know, it's like she says, like, she did not choose to be quiet, you know. Snake didn't choose to be a clone. So, I mean, yeah, I guess Otacon was right when he said, you know, Snake had a hard life. I guess he really did when you think about it.
Oh yeah, so many people want to gloss over that. That's why I say, like, yeah, they're dated games. 87, fuck yeah, they're so old. You need to really, like, until we get new games, until, I hate to put the remake word in my mouth, but until the MSX games get remade, like, you're gonna have to take what we have for these MSX games, as goofy as they are, as canon after Metal Gear Solid V. Like, it's he was trained under Big Boss's thumb, and if we want to take the neurological aspect of what John was going through leading Foxhound, knowing who David was, like, he's not fucking stupid. Yeah. He knew who David was. Didn't he tell him straight up, like, you're my son, by the way? Didn't you know? Yeah. And just from that, like, how easy would it be? Take it from David's point of view. He's a rookie. He went into Foxhound like super young. Big Boss, the leader, tells him, hey, I'm your dad. Yeah. You're going to train under me. Then you're going to do this mission for me. And he loved being in the unit at the time. Yeah. So it was absolutely devastating at the end of it. Even though it was Venom, he didn't know at the time. Right. Even though it was Venom, like, it was the worst. It was probably the worst possible outcome.
Yeah, and just being, you know, the whole, when you think about it in context of what you're saying, I mean, the whole series, it winds up being, you know, Solid Snake suffering for the sins of his father.
Oh, yes. Trapped. That goes down to the DNA thing. It's not just like passing on your genes, quite literally genetically from, you know, seed to egg, but like when it comes the meme of humanity. Yeah. He had to atone for the memes of what Big Boss had lain for him. Yeah. And he still didn't die. Like for the whole saga, like, David still had to watch Big Boss die at Potter's Field. It was he was still atoning for the sins of a man who wasn't dead. It was the worst.
Yeah, almost as his proxy. And I think that's why I have always speculated, you know, if the role, whatever it was that Zero had in creating Venom Snake, I almost have this sense that Venom Snake is the proxy for the punishment that Zero wanted to inflict on Big Boss or something. It's like he has to atone for all the sins of the real Big Boss, you know. And I think that's why he also is a very tragic character, Venom Snake.
Venom Snake is extremely tragic, and I actually am really interested on like how you're wording that, like Zero's motivations and aspirations for Venom, because that was his plan. Exactly. And Big Boss just rolled with it when he woke up, because I think they both had very different plans in play, because John was like, well, I'm going back home and he still had his aspirations he never lost his aspirations for Outer Heaven. If anything, after 1984, or after 1974, and then he woke up in 1984, after that he was like, all bets are off. Like, I'm getting it one way or another, and I'm just going to use Venom to get it. Like,
yeah,
this is convenient to me, says John.
Yeah, but I agree completely. I think that, I mean, that's pretty well established. But I sort of wonder, like, mainly because I have this tendency to relate, the things that happen in the Phantom Pain back to some of its like literary references, especially 1984. Because 1984 just seems so important to it. I kind of wonder if like Big Boss is doing to Venom Snake in a way. I don't know how familiar you are with the book or how long it's been since you've read it. But it's almost
it's been a while, but I think I can make a. I think. Well, what you're putting down.
Near the end, they show Winston that like there's no chance he could ever actually rebel, right? And they.
Oh yeah, he's completely indoctrinated.
They show him a version of himself that's so horrible that he would do anything to not see it, and so he agrees, even though it's just an exercise. Do the torture to Julia, the woman that he's loved the whole time. Do it to her because I don't want it. And so in that moment, he effectively joins the party and becomes one of their agents. I think something similar like that happened after the events of Ground Zeroes in a way or something. But of course, if it did happen, you'd think, well, we would have seen it. So this is just speculation fully on my end. But it almost seems that that's why Big Boss made a deal with Zero, is almost like, I'll make a deal with the devil now and bide my time. And in 30 years or whatever, or once it's ready, then I can use this whole doppelganger thing to as a smokescreen, bide my time, and then come back and get revenge on the whole system that Zero has built in his wake.
Are you implying that like this was a plan like before XOF?
I mean, I have a feeling that the XOF mission to attack Mother Base was sort of a retaliation for the failure of Paz at the end of Peace Walker. I think that, Zero believed that Paz was going to be able to indoctrinate Snake, it's kind of left to us to unpack. So, it almost seems like Paz rushed things because on some subconscious level, she didn't want to succeed. She didn't want to actually win.
You get a huge, like, feeling about that in her truth tapes, right? Like her diaries and stuff.
Yeah, it's like she wanted Snake to come around, and if not, then she wanted to lose to him and be killed by him. I don't think that she seriously tried. So I think Ground Zeroes in a way is part of her punishment as well for failing Zero. But
when it comes to that, like the information game, because Skullface seems so like, thrown into the story. We didn't really know anything about Skullface until Ground Zeroes, right? So it's like, when it comes to the information game, and Skullface is so close to Zero as this strike force that technically Zero owns, right? Who's to say Paz wasn't also answering to him? Like, well, yeah. She didn't, obviously, but she didn't get back. He lost out on this information. Therefore, like, he lost out on, like, a pawn to play.
Yeah, and it didn't work, right? Trying to hijack Zeke and trying to frame MSF for being nuclear terrorists, like that plan didn't work because Snake was able to beat her. So I think she failed. The only thing I think Zero didn't count on was Skullface having his own motives. And Skullface...
Oh yeah, Skullface turning on him.
Yes. And so I think that the whole attack on Mother Base was orchestrated by Skullface and Zero. I think they worked together. I know that goes against some of the things that the game tells us. I know Zero claims that, and it's plausible. I'm not saying that there's no way this isn't true. That, okay... Well,
he is the guy who controls information. He can say whatever he wants and make it true.
That's what's so scary and why it's so hard to trust. But yeah, he claims, Skullface, the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. That Skullface was basically doing a unilateral decision without consulting with Zero, and that he didn't know anything about it. And that in order to make up for it, that he tried to help. He almost presents it in the game as if, Zero is looking out for you. But I think that this is a cover story. And if you go back and listen to when Zero visits Snake in the hospital, it is the most British as fuck thing. But it is so subtle and dry and biting, the things he's actually saying to Snake. And he sounds like he's being old chums, old friends. But in a way, I think he is torturing him because the first thing he brings up...
Yeah, the way he pats the bed like, Snake, can you hear me?
He goes, oh, remember the good old days when the boss broke your arm and threw you in that river? Wasn't that great? You're never going to find me when you wake up. I'm going to be long gone. Like, if he said it like that, it would have been obvious that he was, fucking with him. But that's really what he's saying.
I wish there was a version of, like John not being able to move. Can you imagine if there was a version where he was like, his body was paralyzed and his eyes were open, just glaring at Zero and saying that shit? I would kill for that.
Oh
my God. That would have been so good.
You just get chills thinking about it. Yeah.
But the version we get of Ocelot showing up, and just saying all of this information because he's the direct link. He's like the one link that's trusted to John.
Yeah.
And then all John has to say at the end of it is, I don't care, get me out of Dekelia.
Yeah.
And get this guy where he needs to go. And I'm gonna build up my nation, and you better tell Kaz this eventually, and he better be on board, because if not, he's gone. Yeah. Whoever's not with me at this point is gone. So he took Zero's act of kindness, if you would call it that. Then again, Zero's sick, right? Like,
yeah, that's the other big...
Skullface got one up on Zero, so it wasn't like Zero had like all this power. Obviously, he had agents at his disposal, right? Like, he could get stuff done if he really wanted to. But then there's he still needed Big Boss's DNA for the project.
Yeah,
so he couldn't get rid of Big Boss, but he needed his meme to keep going for war, because he was still profiting off war. Big Boss was broken, but he needed a Big Boss, so he made another one. Yeah. And so it was like, but then when John woke up, he's like, well, this is fucked up, but I need it, so deploy it. Like,
yeah,
and I'm gonna go start Foxhound.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that, if I'm not mistaken, they make a very strange reference to Zero already being sick with something before Skullface poisons him. I know that sounds nuts, but if you go back and listen really close, they do, there's these weird throwaway lines that are made multiple times. I can even remember them. One is like, Ocelot and John are talking, and they're talking about Les Enfants, and then as an offhand remark, Ocelot says, like, was that the start of his madness? Like, who can say? And then,
no, that's depending on like what country you're in, like madness can just be like you're insane, like
true,
making clones, true. like morally insane. That could just be like, oh, he's insane for doing
you're
that.
Mad. Yeah, but that's the ambiguity of language. There is a big one thing I love about Phantom Pain, and that's why I think we'll never be done unpacking it, because the stuff you're talking about right there, like there are so many different ways to read that line, and that depend on where you're from and what
Well, it's completely I think it's completely canon that Zero at one point, I knew he was in love with the boss, and after John like bested the boss, that love just immediately went to John. Like, he just wanted glory. And he was a person that was of glory back in the day. Like, he he rescued Sokolov before, and now here's John, this young gun who bested the boss, and Sokolov technically didn't get. He's in Portable Ops, so we won't talk about it anyway. But he bested the boss. He's now the best soldier in the world when she was, and his love just like immediately gravitated towards him. And when Zero set up his, he got all of his money, he got all of his Wiseman's Committee money, he got his philosopher money, and then he started setting up these proxy battles for John to fight to elevate John to this stature of greatness. Yeah. Just to parade John out, like, look at this amazing, like, American Sniper, right? Exactly. Like, remember that movie came out and everybody loved this guy? It was the same with John. So John had enough, and kind of like a bad breakup. The second he noticed, like, oh, he's gonna leave me, boom, twins.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. He can't leave me if I have his kids. That's really what Zero said. Like, I always have him around if I have his kids.
The idea was that Snake would be the perfect symbol to control the masses, like you were saying, and that Snake resented that, not wanting to be made into a pawn. It almost seems like Snake's trying to avoid the times killing him the way that it killed the boss. It's almost like he's afraid of it, because
that's exactly what happened. Because that's what happened with. And I don't want to bring up, American Sniper again, because he was murdered horribly, and may he rest in peace. But the recruitment for the army skyrocketed when that movie came out, and he was paraded, of course, like almost a saint. And so the same thing happened with John, and the same thing did happen. Like, a lot of her stuff was Black Ops, but like the boss was revered. She was known. People knew about the boss. What happened with the boss was of the times, and John saw it coming a mile away and got out.
And that was the difference.
But this time, there was the difference of times of technology, and because John kind of got unlucky there, he did get out, but you know, Ava was stocked up with twins by the time he left. Right. So, like, if he, I don't know what to tell you, John. You got kids. Pay child support.
But yeah, I mean, it really is like a bad breakup. I mean, I think that is exactly the vibe I got from it as well, and that's why it curdled into something so vicious. And
yeah, so when you go back to like when he visits in Dekelia and he's like, John, Jack, can you hear me? Like it's almost like he's just so almost happy to be there, but you can just hear the bittersweet in his voice. Yeah, and it does sound very teasing. Like it's almost like 5 emotions at once going on. It's a ride.
It is. But that's his victory speech to Snake. Like, I have beaten you, and I am now flaunting that before I disappear and you never see me again. And that's, you know, it almost makes sense of why, in the wake of this, even though Zero's gone, why the real big boss still is going to pursue this revenge against the system he's built. It's like chasing Moby Dick, you know? It's like you can't have... Well, I guess that's not the best analogy because at the end of the book they do encounter Moby Dick again, but it's like the proxy.
Well, they do encounter. They did get Zero. I mean, he kills him at Potter's Field.
That's true. He does chase his white whale and he does get him at the end. So that's a really good point.
And he's wearing white in that scene.
Yeah, God, he looks so. Zero is a terrifying character to me, and I love him how he's in the game. But when I think about what he's doing behind the scenes, it makes me wonder. Like, sometimes I have a conspiratorial mind, and it's like, it's hard for me not to be a little freaked out, just because I'm always thinking, like, how much of this did he know, you know, going into it? It's hard to say for sure. I know there's a lot of debate, you know, did Zero know, for example, at the start of Virtuous Mission, was the whole thing planned for,
Yes.
I think it was. Yeah, so I'm glad you're on my team on that.
The whole thing was, like, planned by one strategist, but they for sure knew about the Philosopher's Legacy. That was not a secret to the inner intelligence of what Zero was planning. I think like that first the very beginning of Metal Gear Solid 3 when Paramedic and Zero share a head nod at the very beginning of the game. Yes. That was like my headcanon was like, oh, they know. Like from the start.
100%. And I think that's borne out if you look closely at the evidence. But yeah, I mean, I think Zero is one of the most fascinating characters, and he almost became it's almost like he created an entire world, an entire religion out of these characters. Like, he used them to create this
a reality for himself. Yeah,
where he's like an all-seeing eye that's invisible, that can, you know, like the Patriots, the way they use people and create scenarios, like they're actors, you know, following a script. It all goes back to Zero, and that's why it's really hard for me to trust anything that guy says, even though...
It's so funny because you never see Zero except for Metal Gear Solid 3, where he's like this bro chummy guy on the codec that's like, you know, talking about scones and tea, and it's so funny, and then here he is like games later, like literally ruining your life, and it's so true. Every single person that is influential that came into his corner, he made into a character in his show. Yeah. Because he was what's the word I'm looking for? One of the 7 deadly sins. Like, he was super prideful. He wanted everything to him. He was very gluttonous of power. Yeah. Like, it's almost too easy to say how it is. He got money, and he got power, and he wasn't about to let it go. And that's why the AIs came up. He didn't want to die. He didn't even know what was going on at the final moments, but he wanted to live. Yeah. To be there. It's even when the AIs were running everything.
It seems to me to be a comment on British or white, if you will, or English-speaking, you know, sense of superiority. Like, Zero always, you know, get that coffee shit away from me. Like, I only drink tea, you know, the the British way. It almost seems like he didn't trust new generations or different types of people to control their own lives, and thought that
he's super conservative.
Yeah, I think that there's an element of British colonialism in Zero. I really do.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting to explore.
Especially given that, you know, I mean, a lot. Phantom Pain deals
even
with this
though
a lot.
he was like touted to be worldly, like he employed Sigint when when Sigint himself was like, well, nobody wanted me because I'm black.
Yeah.
But, the Major doesn't care about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
But there is still so many, like, instances where, he totally sees, like, his own race, almost.
As being
in, like, British.
Yeah.
As in, like, the British version of his race is, like, superior.
Yeah, or the English language. I mean, I think using Sigint only to, like, I feel Sigint is another example, like we were talking about earlier. It's sort of the black equivalent, if you will, of Otacon. Of, like, I think he's being used, by Zero for all the right reasons.
I have been saying this for years. Like, Sigint is the only good guy out of the Patriots. Like, he's been used. Yeah. He loved computers. He wanted to prove himself. And when he was given fat stacks of cash by Zero and power and, like, secrecy levels and, all this stuff, of course he took it. What else was he going to do? When you think of it like, oh, he could just left. No, he couldn't have.
No.
Zero would have killed him.
Yeah, and I think he really believed in building a world where people's race, wouldn't matter as much, where people could just... And he even talks about this, I think, if you call him enough in MGS 3, about the internet and his dreams for it. And I think that there is something genuinely good there. And even Zero, as much as I distrust him, at the end of the day, a lot of the things that he believed in, on paper, I agree with and I believe in.
That's basic politics. I mean, like, look at the recent... not to get too deep into politics, and I won't, but
the
Biden administration, they were like, oh, they vehemently said it, like, on all social media, we're gonna eliminate all student debt. Just recently, what was it, last week? They came out immediately, were like, we are not gonna eliminate any student debt. It's politics. Yeah. So, like, even among a secret codec call, doesn't have to be on social media, doesn't have to be on the news, doesn't have to be in a newspaper. You can say to Snake's face, like, oh, the internet, wouldn't it be great? We can all be connected, we can all work together to create a better world. Then when he got that power, he used it to put everything into his self.
Control. Self-serving.
All control.
Yeah, and I almost feel it ended up being almost a comment on the concept of color blindness. The way Zero wanted to see the world and create a world, it's so naive, and it's such a, if I can use a controversial term, it's a privileged point of view to think that it's going to be that easy for people.
No, that's a very... right word to use.
I mean, I think, and that's really where Skullface, the character, comes from, because here is a guy who can't go back. He can't go to before, like, his
there's stark differences, Everything was taken from him.
And that will never be erased. And so when what Zero sees as a very positive thing, where, we'll all be equals and your face won't matter, your background won't matter. To Skullface, that's just another erasure. And I think... Yeah,
my face already doesn't matter. I don't have a face.
Yeah.
My voice already doesn't matter. This voice isn't mine. I'm speaking a language that's not mine.
That you, that you put there, basically. So, it's a fascinating... And I think it makes it more complex that Skullface is an Eastern European, because even though he is...
He's Hungarian,
Yeah, even though, he comes from a place that has been dominated by superpowers, he too ends up being, at the end of the day, I mean, he's a white guy. Like I saw in the concept art, they specified he's
Caucas.
WASP. Like they wanted to make him look the pre-burned face. Like they tried to style him as just a typical.
But it's so funny you say that, because it's completely true. But like when you ask like different people, like, oh, how do you see Skullface? Like they don't know how to explain him, because he's faceless. So they don't know what skin to put him with. Like his entire skin is purple because he's burned everywhere. Yeah. His voice is this. Love his voice. I forget, who's his voice actor again?
James Horan, I think his name is. Yeah.
Amazing voice. What an amazing voice. Like. It's this type of ambiguous voice where it's strong, but you can't really place it anywhere. Yeah. Kind of like the transatlantic accent back in the day.
That's exactly, yes.
Yes.
That's
where
what
like
I thought
everybody
it
was doing this accent where if you were captured by spies or something, you would do this accent so nobody could place you from your origin.
Yeah, I thought it was transatlantic, his accent, the first time I heard it, but I went back and I think I figured out, I don't know if this is intentional, just a happy accident. You know how it is with Kojima's games, you can never really be sure.
That's the best, those are the best findings if you're like, wait a minute.
Is it possible? Yeah, if you go back and watch, I don't know if you've seen it, it's a huge influence on Phantom Pain and Ground Zeroes. It's Rope by Alfred Hitchcock.
No, I haven't seen it.
Well, like, you know, the whole stylistic conceit of MGSV, like both games, it's like the camera is moving around in the scene.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah. Long shots.
That's from Rope. The way that it moves and like here it's focusing on his arm, now it's gliding up to look at his face and all this. All of that is pulled, at least partially, is a nod to Rope. And Kojima in interviews has even acknowledged this, right? The Rope is about these two. Well, okay, he's acknowledged Rope's influence on him and on the games. He has not literally said the camera specifically is a nod.
Yeah.
It's not as cut and dry as that. But if you watch Rope, the main character in Rope is this crazy guy who was taught Nietzsche when he was in college and got the completely wrong read on Nietzsche, which he believes that Nietzsche is saying, if you are morally, you know, the master, if you are morally superior to others, you can kill them and it be moral. That's what he takes from Nietzsche. And so the whole movie is about, he drags his friends along with his plot and they kill an associate of theirs from college, hide his body in a box, and then invite over that dead guy's entire family and the teacher who taught them Nietzsche for a dinner party, all in order to make some sort of point that only the teacher will know. Like, they don't reveal the body to the family. They're just doing that just because, to lord their superiority over, right? But I won't ruin the movie. But it ends with an incredible speech, but I'm not going to ruin it. But where I'm going with this is that guy, the crazy guy, Brandon, the main character, his voice sounds exactly like Skullface.
Wow.
Exactly. And there's a famous scene where the professor is like, I have to open that case. I have to open it. And then Brandon just lets it out and he goes like, all right, I hope you like what you see. Like, it sounds
oh my God, yeah,
like Skullface. It sounds exactly like Skullface. So to me, there's some connection there, and it could be a coincidence, but it sounds so similar. Like, I wonder if that didn't influence the casting, but I don't know.
You know what? I'm gonna have to watch this movie like tonight. Hopefully it's on like Prime Video or something, but like
It's an incredible movie. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch this movie tonight. Yeah, oh yeah, all of Hitchcock's movies are pretty short.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally. Like, that sounds so interesting. Like, I delved into, I remember I got kind of addicted. So, personally, I have ADHD, severe ADHD, so I don't get to choose my hyperfixations. So I don't watch a lot of movies because every movie I watch is kind of like swing and a miss, right?
I see.
But there's a chance that one movie I hit the ball and I will run with this movie for like half a year and all I can think about is this movie. And it happened to me at the beginning of this year when I finally sat down and watched 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, man.
I was obsessed.
Oh, man.
I was obsessed. I like watched every frame, like frame by frame, broke that movie down, and then of course I think I should dig it back up, but I wrote an entire like Twitter like log of the comparisons of Metal Gear Solid to 2001, and I was like, I get it now. I totally get it. And it's just, I want to watch more movies that inspired Kojima. I finally watched Blade Runner as well, which Cody my husband, he like forced me to do it. Because I was like, I knew I was going to like it, and I did. I love Blade Runner.
Yeah.
But yeah, like all these movies that have come out or all these movies that have inspired Kojima, I definitely want to catch up on. Because I'm not a big film guy, and I feel like you should be if you're into Kojima games, but I'm actually not that big of a film guy.
Oh, you don't have to be. I mean, I think it's...
Yeah,
no, it's... I am, and I even had a series for a while. It was called Movie Gear Solid, which is the stupid name, but a fun series. But because of copyright issues, I had to basically stop.
Oh.
Yeah, I did one on Escape from New York, and apparently it's a really sore subject with the people who own Escape from New York. Because
they wanted to sue Kojima!
Yeah. So I think they were not going to just let me make a video all about how Kojima, was inspired by their movie. So even though they didn't make it, I mean, obviously, the actual guy, John Carpenter, who made the movie, is fine with Kojima and actually said, he's nice to me. So
he's the one that stopped it. He's like, don't, because this guy's a good guy.
Yeah, that's what's ironic.
I thought that was really cute, actually.
But going back to Skullface and all of that, I think like it's impossible to really talk about phantom pain and not go into some of these subjects, like race and history and politics and all this. And I think that the interplay there is kind of ends up being about, the utopian dream of the internet and how so many of these well-meaning but ultimately naive and incorrect, programmers and thinkers from Silicon Valley who thought that the internet was going to be a totally liberating thing, that it would, all of the old hatreds and animosities, would disappear. It's like, in a way, the internet has sadly magnified a lot of them and brought some of them back to life, we have Nazis again and stuff like that.
Yeah, with the explosion of just the modern internet.
Yeah.
It's bad because, where we've done a lot of good with the collective thinking of globalization on the internet, it's the yin and the yang. You can't have one without the other, right?
Yes.
We would love to live in a utopia. It's kind of hard to say, especially on Twitter, which I really shouldn't say here, but it gets me going because a lot of people want it just one way. Yes. They want this utopia where it's we will only do this. Where you technically can do that. You can protect yourself today. You can mute words. You can block people. You can create this area if you're not a politician, if you're not a big figurehead, if you're just some guy that works a job and needs to get on Twitter and wants that space for you, make it your space. That's great. But in the whole of the internet, you're gonna have some people that get together that make this really awesome thing that betters mankind, and then you're gonna have neo-Nazis that storm the Capitol and gouge a policeman's eyes out. That's literally what happened.
Yeah.
And that literally happened because of the internet. They all banded together, said on the internet, what was it, the height of Parler? Stuff like that. Where it's just it happened within weeks. It wasn't even that fast. It wasn't even that long. It just happened super compact, and then it happened and people lost their lives over it. And that's just how strong and powerful the internet can be. Now imagine that at wartime.
Yeah.
Which I can't speak on it because I'm not Palestinian.
Yeah.
But what's going on right now? They have almost complete media blackout, and people are using what's Snapchat to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And
it's awful.
It's stuff like that. So when you pair that with Metal Gear, which I don't want to put very real, actual wartime things going on to Metal Gear, but when you have to compare it, Metal Gear Solid 4 does it goddamn so fucking perfectly. Every time you go through a war zone and you hear the jingle of a commercial, you think that wouldn't happen? That's so real.
The theme of MGS4 is in Israeli.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. It's difficult. I think that even Phantom Pain, as I did research, I started to realize they were actually making more references to Israel than at first you might have guessed. But it's such a sensitive topic because, obviously there genuinely are anti-Semites out there who will use criticizing Israel as a cover for being anti-Semitic, and that's
the worst. That's the worst.
Yeah, it's created this awful situation where if you say anything negative about what Israel is doing, it becomes equated to you're saying bad things about Israel itself, you are against Israel itself, and the whole thing just gets so muddied because of intersectionality and how we're talking about, they are white, but they're also Jewish. So it just creates a lot of room for misunderstanding and for just worsening the situation.
Which creates confusion, which creates anger, which creates revenge.
Exactly. And so it's difficult to talk about this at all. But, in my research, just what I was alluding to is that you may remember there's a tape where Kaz is talking about what's been going on in South Africa. And he says, that the Vela disturbance of, I believe it was 1980 or 81, where there was a strange flash over the Indian Ocean. And, most likely that was a nuclear test that was conducted by South Africa with the help. And in MGS5, he just says, of a certain ally. And he says, a certain ally that whose relationship with South Africa, apparently Skullface had some involvement with, right? It's almost overwhelmingly likely that certain ally that he was alluding to was Israel. Because Israel has a secret nuclear weapons program that you're not even really supposed to talk about, that they don't officially acknowledge exists. They have a policy.
Everyone knows it's there.
It's called nuclear ambiguity. It's sort of like what Big Boss is trying to do at the beginning of Ground Zeroes when he says, like, we don't want the world to know we have this nuke until it's time to use it. It's kind of like that. But of course, the whole situation is extremely complicated, and it goes back to the Cold War and all this stuff that I won't get into, but it's really easy to just derive a conclusion from it that's very simple. Like, oh, X is the bad guy, whether it's the Israelis or the Americans or whoever. And it's just the actual realities of the world are a lot more complicated than that. And so I think that's why they probably avoided just coming out and, fingering Israel, because then it would sound like, oh, or is this game making some kind of political statement? I don't think it's trying to. But that history did happen, and it can't just be lost to history. And if I'm being honest with you, it was there was a racial reason for Israel and South Africa to work together. They talked about it. Like, they were like, well, we are both essentially white countries that are besieged by non-whites, then we have to protect ourselves with these nukes. So, I mean, it takes on an apartheid thing. And of course, when South Africa switched its government to a non-apartheid state, one of the last things that the apartheid government did was get rid of the nukes because they didn't want the new black government to have them. So it's race and nuclear weapons are a lot more closely tied. This is something I found out in my process of researching for Phantom Pain than I would have ever imagined. But it's all wrapped up, and of course that's not to say anything about the other race stuff in Phantom Pain, like the conflict minerals, the blood diamonds, the human trafficking. I mean, you don't want to only talk about countries in Africa in extreme terms, or because obviously they're human beings and they have normalcy there. It's not like it's always something really extreme. But these extreme things are happening there, and I think it's something that since at least Metal Gear Solid 2, this series has been trying to wake people up, especially around stuff like child soldiers and resource exploitation. And these things have racial dimensions as well as political dimensions. And I'm not trying to turn Metal Gear into propaganda for my particular cause, although I've certainly been accused of that. I just think that these issues, you can't go into this game and not be at least thinking about stuff like third world exploitation and all this other stuff when we're literally playing a game that is set, on the Angola-Zaire border region in the middle of the 80s. Like, I don't know, but I think a lot of people would prefer not to see that stuff.
I think that goes into what it's similar, but in the iceberg I made a couple weeks ago, at the very bottom, I put Metal Gear Solid meme disinformation campaign, where they talk about these super real world topics that should spark conversation. Yeah. But then they put this goofy ass shit in the middle of the game. And all people talk about now is nanomachines or hamburgers. And then you bring up, well, what about, child soldiers that's going on in Africa, blah, blah, the blood diamonds and all this stuff. What are you talking about? I didn't listen to those tapes. Anyway, hamburgers of Kazuhiro Miller tape 3, the chemical burger. How many calories? Shut up. Like that type of stuff. Yeah. Like, and it goes into every game where it's like, oh, these are super real world topics that Kojima is tackling. It was translated really well in the script. They're doing it in a way that you can digest it and then think upon it. And like you, for your videos, you've done extra research on your own, which not a lot of people would do. And you've given people like better insight of like, the themes of what's going on behind the scenes, especially your Peace Walker videos are amazing. And so it's like, this stuff is invaluable because when it comes to the ends of the means of what the story it's trying to tell, I think it would better everybody to know like the background of why, not why, but like of what in the middle of what they're getting into or what they're about to experience, and like the context of what they're about to interact with, because then that's when you get people who are like, well, I didn't understand the story. Or, I don't understand why Big Boss was there. I don't understand why Snake was there. Like, or the tried and true, what the hell does Metal Gear Solid even, like, what is that? What is Metal Gear Solid even about? Hear that all the time. Yeah.
No, you do. And for all the reasons you're saying, people will get so distracted. But, what scares me is that if I could have it my way, I would leave the actual part where you come up with the context. If I could, I would leave that to the viewer. because I think that that is something that they try to do in Metal Gear Solid, where how you ultimately feel about this stuff is up to you. And who you decide it was in the right or in the wrong can be left to you. But what happened is not up to you. That is up to history. Because it happened or it didn't, you know? And so if people want to see
this falls under a meme, which is like, you know, the genetic or the cultural genetics that you want to carry on. So it happened to you, but do you carry it on to your next of kin?
Yeah, and because if you don't, it's just like it never happened, and that
sets it up for history to repeat itself.
Exactly, and it's also, you know, it's just, I feel like Metal Gear is about, you know, raising your voice to things that aren't right, to saying this isn't okay. We have to be more aware. We have to talk about this stuff. It's not okay that in a blink of an eye the whole world could be destroyed. It's not okay, you know, that terrorists are blowing themselves up. Like, trying to find a way to talk about these things and agitate for discussion, I think, is a big part of it. And so, yeah, I don't want, but at the same time, I think a huge part of Metal Gear, as much as it is a politically driven story and stuff, they do, at the end of the day, because it's a game, you know, try to leave room for multiple interpretations and multiple ways of seeing it. And so that's why it was really difficult at first not to divert this conversation and talking about my own work, because I'm just one guy. But I think it would have been very difficult for Kojima too, to figure out how do you balance those two? Like, how do you make a statement, but at the end of the day, still leave it in the player's hands, almost like an act of trust, like you said earlier, like passing something down, almost like the tapes in a physical form, but this is more, you know, symbolic. How do you pass down what you want to pass on, but you still leave the final decision of what did it really mean to the player? That's very, very, very difficult to figure out how to do when you're presenting content on YouTube and stuff, because ultimately I'm gonna have to tell you how it seems to me, what the context at the end of the day was for me. So ultimately,
it's just like at the end of Metal Gear Solid 2, like, he has created the content and then the people must create the context.
Yeah, because
he just dropped it on us. And he does talk about his games, but not to the extent that like other developers would talk about their games, or even to, like, some developers just straight up like, here's the game, just lays it all out. Kojima just gives it to us. And then it's up to us to create the genetic meme of these games later. Okay, I think we're an hour and 35 minutes in, so I think we should like, start wrapping it up a little bit. We were talking.
Yeah. We were. I didn't even notice. I looked up. I said, "Holy shit! How much time has passed?"
I want the viewers at home to know. Episode 1 was supposed to be about Kazuhiro Miller, and we just went off. We were literally supposed to talk about Kazuhiro today, but I think this is actually the perfect intro.
Yeah.
To be like, this is how we feel. By the way, here's your narrators. This is how we feel about Metal Gear Solid, and we just fucking went off.
Yeah. I love it.
I like that.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Yeah, we'll catch you guys next time.
Thank you for coming. Bye.